boy is leaning, definitely probably coming out of an acceleration, like towards the end. Because of where your torso is, right, he's leaning forward, but his hip is relatively at 90 degrees and his arm is relatively at 90 degrees. Whereas, like, when you get into an upright sprint, it's going to be higher. Okay? So, with that kind of in mind, like, you're going to see knee drive and hip flexion. Like, it's not going to be, like, huge, but you can see, like, there's got two diagrams here of, like, two different sprinters, and then they're just different. It's going to be based on body type. It's going to be based on stiffness, like muscle tone, stuff like that. But really what you look for, and here I can blow this up for you guys too because this one's a lot better, is like the heel recovery. Yeah, so you see how homie on the left is like smashing calf, right? Like running C, right? That's the whole point. Homie's just tight.
Is that Griff?
No, right? Looks like Griffin. No,
Griffin and Hunter?
Hunter, just that's when he was just probably way too stiff, right? And that's probably like 40 pounds heavier. So like it's tough, right? And that's why like we always say it's so abusive. Like look how many times he got hurt. Like you're running with that much tension, like someone's gonna fall off. And I think he's not having nearly as many problems now because he's leaned out so much and he's kind of just literally forced his body to sprint for him. But if you could see like right, like we're always hand to face. Like no matter where the relative lean is here, if I'm here, I can still get like 90 degrees up into my stride, and thinking this is lifting everything up. And we'll go over cues in a second. And then as far as like rotation, looking at cues for rotation, let me turn this over. If you look at this here, okay, I just like you know this top one. So like over rotation, you're gonna see kids come across their center line. Okay, so you just gotta cut people in half. Like I'm thinking of like our side to side cam shaders, like Ava's, like boom, boom, hand coming to opposite chest. That is just wasted motion that could be put into going in a faster straight line. Okay, and so like when I see stuff like that, you have to figure out how to show them that. That's why film is so important, I think, when we're doing this. And then correct it. Like you gotta be like, hey, like do you see this? Like do you see how you're coming across your body? Now it's like, stop right here. Let's just go front to back here real quick. All right, you feel the difference of that? Like now when we go to sprint, like we need to go ahead and use that motion. All right, and like no, it's like it's gonna be slower and it's gonna feel different, but it's new, so that's okay, right? Like anytime you do something new, it's not gonna be great. Like you can't reteach someone who's been running like 13 years the way that no one's told them to run. So it's like they're just gonna pick up bad habits and it's kind of our job to fix them. But approaching midline is fine, okay? So if I'm coming up here, you'll see I'm coming up, I get to like my face, all right? But I'm not coming across my body here. It should be up and back, getting here kind of like nose, eye level. And then you also, like we took into account the other day when like Flanders was running, like you gotta think of like demands of the sport, right? Because at the end of the day, these aren't sprinters, they are athletes. And like getting them as best mechanics as possible is going to help a ton, but like someone's like a pitcher's always going to have a stiff right shoulder, and like you're going to see limitations there. You're going to see like a volleyball player is going to have like a limitation in like arm raising, and it's just like if it looks pretty dang good, like be okay with pretty dang good, because like perfection, unless they're like a track athlete, like it's just not achievable. Like they don't need it because like
especially for some of them, like I think of Flanders again, like have a sport when he's sprinting is with either basketball, like dribbling, or like even like a Talsma where he's bent over like holding a hockey stick. Like that's a sport, right? He's like down here, like going as fast as he can. So like the fact that he can even have that kind of motion with his arms,
you're right.
Sweet.
It's gonna the more active range of motion he has, the better he's gonna be able to when he uses those like kind of shortened up ranges. And it actually kind of goes over hockey too. But like when we're talking about drills, or specifically arm mechanics, like looking at a mock drill, you're always going to look for elbow flexion, right? Bent elbow, okay? And like you want to maintain that the whole time, okay? So like if I'm marching here, getting front side here, or you want to go even up here, like you see my arm will kind of drop down there, that's fine. I don't need them to go like, especially on a slow one, they don't have to split because you're not really need to bounce anything. Like that's the only reason this goes back is so I don't fall forward. It's just gonna whoop or upright me. So if they're just going nice and easy, right, we're gonna keep elbows flexed and then taking our time. And then as the speed increases, you'll see that arm start to fly back for the same reason I just said, right? Like that arm, when you're sprinting, your arm's gonna kind of open up on its own. You don't gotta think about it because you're going so fast that you're not trying not to fall over. It doesn't feel like that, which is great, but yeah, the higher speeds, the elbow's gonna open up more, but you're not trying to do that. It's just gonna happen.
So that for a person like Cheech, who runs like this, like no matter.
Yeah, man, he's not moving. He's running with his elbows, not with his shoulders, right?
Right.
So then that what would the cue be?
Think about rotation of like bring your elbows higher.
You're gonna tell Cheech to think about your rotation.
Something with his hands.
Yeah, I would just say you gotta obviously film would help. It's like, do you see what you're doing here? I want you to think maybe more. Like it would be just dependent on the stride. Like if he's opening up, like you gotta think more front, like or more up, not back. Or think more flick. Just like quick little words that are gonna get him to kind of get more in front. Because he's really, like, if you're opening up that much, like, you're super backside. I mean, you want to try to get everything in front first and then kind of go from there. Okay.
Yeah, he's like throwing his arm back.
Yeah. And then, like I said, you're always going to want to cue their arms. It's a lot easier to move your arms faster than your feet, right? They're right here, they're close to your brain. And it's easier to coach, right? Like, if you say, hey, like, your hand's here, get it higher. Rather than like, hey, I want you to sprint as fast as you can, also step over your opposite shin, get your knees up. Like, it's just tougher to cue that. You can, and in certain scenarios it'll work. Like, don't like not do it, but like always start with the hands and see what kind of changes you can get first, and then once you've kind of exhausted all your options there, go elsewhere. Okay. So some like practical arm drills that we really haven't done just because we've been taking advantage of the nice weather outside, but especially as we move inside here, and especially as we get more new people who are younger, like these are money, and like these will take the place of like, not take the place, but it'll be like in addition to mock drills, you would do this beforehand. All right, so you get done with the warm up, you come out, all right, like, hey, like we're gonna get into a seated position and we're gonna do like arm drills. And so like if you think about this, like a really good one here is to have all the kids sit down. Okay, and like this is important for two reasons, because one, it shows you that like how important arms are with getting your hips high, because if your hips are higher, your legs can cycle faster underneath you, right? That's why we would say, hey, get up, like rise up, and then once you're up, stay up, right? Because you want like your hips to stay high throughout the whole sprint here. And so like if we like sit down, or I call this like just a seated arm action drill, you'll be like, all right, we're gonna go through 3 phases: a walk, a run, and a sprint. Okay, so it'll be 1, 2, 3. Every time I say the numbers, you're gonna do the speed. All right, and so 1, I'm just walking, like an exaggerated walk. 2, I'm running, and then 3, I'm sprinting. Okay, and you see everything lifts up, like my arms lift my hips up off the floor. All right, and so it's a good, and then they'll be like, all right, back to 1, and then 2, and then 3, 1, or you go like to 2. Like, it's not to mess them up. It is for good pattern, right? So like when kids are going here and you see this, it's like, hey, Kelson, sit up. And like, get your hands up by your face. Boom. Okay, don't gotta think about anything else. Really good one to start with. Kids love that one. Really good for the middle school group. Do those. Then go do mock drills and see what happens, right? Like, you may probably get some pretty good changes. And then you can just do like a standing, like an arm action drill. Like, get them set up at a falling start. Okay? And then I'll just say, all right, so when I say hit, you're going to split your arms. So if your left leg's in front, left arm's going to go up, right arm's going to go back, and you're just going to do it on my hit. So I'll say, ready, hit, split your arms, right? And you're just working on that start mechanic of being in a crouch position here and getting your arm to go forward, right? I want to make sure when we're looking at that, you're looking to see if the arm goes forward first, or at least at the same time. If you see this go, right, no bueno. Got some slow kids. And like, you can rehearse that, right? And that's why we always do that, like with the rehearsal drill. It's like, hey, like I'll have them maybe do that, and then And then we'll go do mock drills, and then we'll go back. All right, hey, just like at the beginning here, okay, I'm just gonna do like 1 or 2. Like this just practices, right? If I'm looking down here, nothing's really getting accomplished, right? But if I'm looking, if I'm starting up, I want to focus on getting my hands in front here. If you want to come up here and show them, like so, face sideways, like right next to me, and then facing the fridge. Idiot. Go ahead, get set up in your split stance here, and then I want you to bend over and just kind of just like start doing an arm swing. Good, and so like I can even like put my hand out, like hey, like come touch my hands, and you do more out in front. You feel that difference there, like he was here. I mean, like you just kind of watch it. Be like, hey, like pause, like don't go, and then we'll just go ahead and like you're gonna come up and just touch my hand. Go ahead. Yep. That's it. And like so, then you just literally position them to where you want them to go, right? Mm-hmm. Because like a lot of times what will happen is they'll bring their face to their hand, not literally hit themselves with things. So, yeah, it's tough, and like especially when we always say you don't want to say a lot. Because then you're going to get their brain all wiring, and it's like you can't really run fast and do things. Like if I gave you 3 things to think about when you sprint, you might remember one of them, but then the whole time you're sprinting, you're remembering how you forgot the other 2, and then everything just went out the window. So do stuff that gets them to do what you want without really having to say as much. Like stuff like that is cash, or even like an arm drill. Like you're just changing the height of their arms, and you're just trying to do it a lot so they remember the pattern. I'll do like anywhere from like 2 to 4 sets of stuff like that. All right, like arm action, seated arm action drill, like we'll go 1, 2, 3, do like each one a couple of times through, like just based on feel, how's it looking? If it starts to look like crappy and kids are like goofing and stuff, like, all right, take a break, like 30 seconds, 40 seconds, we're gonna hang out, like, all right, we're gonna go again. It's tough to do on the ground, it's not gonna, but like turf, no problem. And then the arm action drill, I'll do like maybe 3 sets of that, like 4 to 6 each arm. Just like get them in the head, like, and you'll do that like pre-falling start, and then you'll just see kind of how that arm is going to take them up, right? Okay. So if we're going over mock drills specifically, all right, the history of this, you really want to get into it, is they would do these in Poland for track season to maintain speed when they didn't have an outdoor track. So they would train in a basement at like this like little like rinky-dink track, and like the whole goal of this is like you can get faster in a phone booth if you had to, right? Because you can't do all these in place and get a ton out of it. So like if we're going through the checklist here, like you have like specific strength development for sprinting, right? It is literally a run in place or a mark, like it's all the positions you hit in a sprint. All right, and then you're learning skill and technique at the same time. Like, because sprinting is a skill, that's why you got to practice it so much. And the technique associated with it is only going to make the skill better. And then you can also use them. Obviously, you've seen us use them in like return to play protocols, right? We got hamstring issues, we got knee issues, so like groin, stuff like that. Like people can just do better at different heights. And I'll kind of show you why here. Because like if you think about it, right, like someone might have a torn adductor or like a strained groin or whatever it is, and it's like, how come they'll go to PT and they'll come here and they're like, oh gosh, I can't sprint, like it hurts, but like my PT said I'm good to go. It's like because you did like a ton of like what you call acyclical, which just means stop, start. So I'm gonna lift my leg up, bring it back and stop. Or like even if I'm going this, like this speed versus that speed is just nowhere near the same continuum, and your body responds differently to different speeds or velocities. So like when people come to us, like you go to a lower amplitude start like that, like I can get someone who's got like, oh my hip hurts, but I can do an ankle step over. It's like, that's a sprint. It's just really small steps. Like, and like cue the crap out of it, coach the crap out of it. It's because with the higher you're gonna lift your leg, when it hits the ground, it's gonna be way more force, right? So like when I say like it's like what you're looking at like 5 to 7 times your body weight per stride at max velocity, like top speed. Like that's why it's so critical, but also it's like it deserves some respect. And like you can take like a depth drop, for example, you take someone's body weight and then you multiply it by 9.2 or 9.8 squared. And that's how much force hits the ground. So if you take me, you take 200 pounds, multiply it by like 9 times, like that's like almost 100. That's like 2,000 pounds of force every time I do a depth drop. Like that's a ton. And like, so jumps and like sprints, like stuff like that, demand respect. And that's why the technique is so important, because then you do run into like little rinky-dink issues, but like even just having Ian do resets and stuff, like getting you in a better position, like he sprinted a ton over the summer and into the fall. Like it's like the wheels are starting to come off a little bit just because he can only hold position so well before like his mobility or whatever like movement restrictions kind of started to catch up with him. Like you're looking at calf, ankle strength, like all these can be accomplished through mock drills. And then we can write this down. So like what we're like, so like if you want to think about like what are we doing with this, like you're always like, why are we doing marches? Okay. Okay. We're looking at posture. Okay, always looking at posture first, right? Like, are they standing tall? Like, where are they positioned? Are they like leaning back? Are they leaning forward? Like, if you start, like I said, with the posture, that's going to kind of clean up everything else. But then paired with that is also going to be limb mechanics, which these are obviously tied together, big time. All right, and then if we go to like skips, we'll use these for what is it again? Elasticity. So think like that pop, that bounce effect. And then power, right? I want to say, yeah, limb power and velocity. So if you think about it, a skip is really a jump, right? A jump that you land on your same feet or same foot. Okay, so if I come up here, I'm coming up, and then take it on my lip, and then I'm just switching so fast it doesn't really feel like it. But the reason I think, like, trying to get kids to take these seriously, they're never going to understand the science, right? Okay? So it's on you to find a way to meet them kind of where they're at, to be like, hey, like, this is goofy, we do these every day, but, like, there are tremendous performance effects to give somebody, like, more elastic ankles, right? You see, get someone who comes in here who's like a tomato, right? You throw them on the ground, they just splat, and then it takes them 8 minutes to get their other foot off the floor in a sprint, versus someone like a higher trained, like Ian, like a sock or something like that, where it's like they're literally like rubber band ankles, they just snap off the ground. Like skipping will do that, and it's also going to develop power, right? Like we talked about, like you're skipping in place with like some semblance of intent, like it's going to get you stronger. It's going to be like way stronger. And it transfers like specifically to sprinting. And then if we just go to a running A, that's going to be more frequency. So kind of practicing the speed of running in place. And then I want to say it's the same thing too. It's also going to be, like lower leg stiffness. / ground contact time, like prep. Basically just getting your lower body ready for like the high speeds it's about to encounter in the ground. Because with this, I had a really good epiphany with this morning with Stone. Is like, oftentimes what happens is you tell kids to do run like high knees, and there's just a really bad association with it just because of what sports trainers do, right? Like let's get back here, let's get those knees up, like it's just like really awkward and uncomfortable. Then you try to cue arms, right? What happens? It's like they're doing like a Versa climber or something stupid. So when I told Stone today, because I'm like, dude, like that's just something, he's like, is that even like, it doesn't look comfortable, right? And then like if it's not comfortable, they're not gonna do it when they go to sprint fast. So what I told him was like, hey, just like pretend you're running in place and just like stay relaxed. And like so he went from like this to like that, like. No thought, he's like, dude, that felt like so much better. I'm like, yeah, because it's not a high knee, it's a running A. You're running in place and developing power. So like, don't I would say, yeah, let's call it that to the kids. They'll be like, what's that? You're like, oh, it's like a high knee, but like, just run, don't do a high knee. Or be careful with how you word that, right? Because like, you don't want to like get in their heads with it and say like, act like we're changing things, but like, if you see a kid who struggles with the whole concept of like getting hands up, but they're only in front, and there's no backside balance, like, just tell them to run in place. Like, pretend you're running in place, and just go at a walking pace when we go forward, okay? Because if you don't tell them that, they're going to sprint. With coaching stuff like this, like, never, like, pull a kid out. Like, if that's an issue, like, hey, like, they're really struggling with this, and I don't mean just, like, first day, like, can't skip. I mean, like, hey, like, we can fix this if we just pull them aside and have them slow the crap down and not worry about everybody watching them. It's like, hey, like, come over here. It's like, this is what you're doing. Like, let's try this. All right, because like, if you just say it as they're walking by, like, hey, like, get your hands up. Like, okay, yeah. Like, you see like chicken school today. Like, you know, like, in one ear at the other. Like, you need to make sure you get their eyes and like get their attention, and like, that should help a ton.
So when it comes to stuff like that, do you think that that's probably the most advantageous thing of having multiple coaches doing a speed session? So like the one person who's like leading the group can lead the group, and the other people can be like, hey, like we're gonna take
Absolutely, and that's exactly what we should be doing, right? It's like we're not there to kind of watch. Like there's a relationship piece, and it's good to build, like especially like on the breaks, right? Like, but like if you have someone doing like cues to go, like our hits or whatever you want to call them, like great, but like the other guys are like, you are the correctors. It's like, okay, like Ian's not gonna worry about anything, but just telling the kids when to go, give them good spacing, like we'll get them in line. Like Alex and Trevor are going to, hey, like I'm pulling you aside, hey, let's try this instead, see how it goes, right? We have to know, did it improve, did it not, and then you circle back and then kind of keep readdressing those issues, right? Because even with someone like as advanced as like the Ashley the other day, it took her like 3 or 4 reps for me to get her to do a running C into a sprint, like wow. And like think of like people who haven't been training their whole lives. Like it's gonna take reps and like it's gonna take sessions sometimes. So like that, like, and especially you clean up this stuff, like that's going to clean up like those overstride heel contacts. It's gonna clean up everything else because it should be patterned well enough and coached well enough. But you guys all know what these look like, so I'm not gonna go ahead and demo any of these. This is like and then like talking about like amplitude step overs or like gear 1, gear 2, gear 3 is basically like this like running like the running A's, or like I should say, sorry, the ankle step overs, or like I don't know what we call those. Overheights, that's what I'm talking about, okay. You can go 1, 2, and 3, just label them if you want, but remember, because it's not like a high knee lift, it's like, because like you'll see kids like come out here, all right, I'm stepping, I'm running. If I'm running, I just get it really small, and then I'll build it up. That's all it is. And so like when it starts to look awkward like that, be like, hey, just pretend it's like a little mini run, but not like a, like, the cadence helps, but like, let them get it, let them get the rhythm on their own first, and then add like frequency or speed as they develop it. Because there are some kids who, if you do like clap, like that's great, and they'll get it great. Other kids will just completely melt because they're like, oh, like what the hell am I doing? Like, so just know who you're working with, like especially the young kids. Like, get the posture first, get the mechanics right, opposite arm, opposite leg, and then we'll worry about all this other stuff because you can't even do those other 2 until you get this. And even like if I can't get a kid to skip, there's something that you can do the exact same as this to get both these qualities. Would just be an ankle jump. Ankle jump.
Like a low pogo or
over distance, yeah. So I think it's like, hey man, like most of these kids are having a hard time. Like maybe it's just like let's like double down on marches, make sure we get those down, and then I'll just have them ankle jump in place. So I'll give them a hit. All right, I'll just go either hands on the hips just so they can't really like freak out. I don't know. I just like this position better. And then going forward. All right, so it's kind of like that pawing action. I'm like flicking the ground with my feet. I'm not up here because woo, what could happen? Like I just bend my knees way too much. All right, I'm kind of more midfoot. And then going forward. If you go midfoot, they will touch their whole foot. So I don't know where you got a cue to fix that, but be looking for that. Like if they're up on their tippy toes, especially if they're wearing those stupid like hypermaxes, like I would almost tell them like don't crush the heel because then they're gonna be really heel heavy. But it's like, hey, like stop, don't go, okay, like everybody stop, like get more in the middle of your foot, like stop the whole group if you need to. That's fine. We don't really do B skips because most of the time there's really no transfer. But like a running C, for example, like every time we do that, it's just light and quick, because what we're really working on is like elastic ground contact, so like snapping off the ground, and like it actually gives you a little more flexibility in the quads. So stuff like that, like it shouldn't be a slow running C, it should be pop, 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 take off. Yeah. Because what can happen here is if the ground contacts are too long, it becomes almost like more of this like pawing action, which like it's gonna really like kind of put a lot of force into your knee that you really don't want. It's gonna give you more time on the ground, more time backside, which is like kind of like public enemy number one. We're talking about sprinting, you never want to be backside. And then your arms are just all over the place, right? And like if people have a hard time with it, I just say it's a butt kick with getting your hands up to your face. That usually works. But like don't underestimate these drills and don't just let them go just because I know it's super easy for us to get bored with them because holy cow, but like stuff like this kind of helps, like just refreshing yourself, like oh like we only have an hour, like we're not wasting time doing these, like these are like the fundamentals and like it works clearly, like you guys have all done them, you guys all know like to some extent that like all these drills have made us all better sprinters, it's made all our top athletes better sprinters, like there's no question behind it. So alright, so those are like our main drills, but you can kind of lump, I should say, drills into two categories. One being like an active, which is like teaching a new skill. Or you can think of like reactive, which is like correcting something. So it's like, hey, like today, like we're teaching an active drill of arm action. But then with the high school group, we're gonna do a reactive drill of, I'm gonna have one person put their hands up because for whatever reason, when I tell them to stand up, they're right here. But if I tell them to put their hands up, they'll get up there. And it's just cue and stuff like that. So like that's a reactive drill. And you can do that as an active drill. But at the same time, like just like how like lifting and everything else, like it's all gonna be super dependent on the individual, right? Like most people aren't gonna need the hands overhead, some will. Don't be afraid to like single a person out like that and be like, hey, like I'm gonna have you just do this rep with your arms overhead, just you. Okay, like you're just like and like be careful with how you word it, right? Like you don't be like, oh, you're different. Like it's not gonna fly very well. But it's like, hey, like I'm just like you don't even have to say much. But like, hey, can you just put your hands over your head this rep? If you get any blowback, just be like, oh, like I'm just trying to like work on your posture a little bit. That's it. It'll be really easy because if they're new, like oh, like everybody that had to do this at some point. They just gotta just trust me.
Just trying to fix your genetics.
Yeah. But you can kind of think of like
years of bad breathing.
The importance of this and like this will kind of transfer to how like what people use it. Like the marching A takes no strength whatsoever, right? No, neither does like arm action, but like you do need some strength to skip, and that's why like an ankle jump might be the case. If a kid's just not strong, he's not going to skip good, because it does require some of that power, and it does require a little bit of velocity. And if you don't have strength, you really can't access either of those. But then you can also throw in like ankle step overs into like this category of like some strength, or like maybe even shin step overs. But as soon as you get into like a running A or like a bound or something like that, where a bound is that you just take off on one foot and land on the other, that requires significant strength. Like that's like so part of me is like, I think for a while there I used to not even go over, I wouldn't even do running A's with middle schoolers, I would just go to gear 2. Just because like you're not getting a ton out of it. Their strength's going to be mostly in the weight room, which is fine. But like high schoolers, you can definitely get away with it for sure. And then
Emergency poop.
if a drill's not working, like if for whatever reason we run into these problems where like you're doing the same stuff and like you're not getting the changes you want, like tell me, like we can switch it. I mean, we don't have to do it. Like, yeah, like I notice like every high knee we do here is a complete waste of time because no one's getting it right, and like cool. Or like if you think like running C's are just not worth our time, like let's nix it. Like the drill is supposed to work for a reason, and if it doesn't, that's just
Dependent sometimes.
yeah, 100%. And then here's some notes I have from using like okay. This one I really liked. Like you can do for like our change of direction days, so our A days or even our Q days. You can use these drills for agility and quickness, and like the way you would do that is alternating gears on command. So it's like, all right, ankle step over, shin step over, ankle step over, shin step over, and like you do that over height and distance, or you do it in place, get them going forward, and you change on a command, training quickness. you're also training agility, because what is agility? You change levels of heights as you cut. So you're like, yeah, your center of mass, like your hips aren't dropping to the ground, but changing levels like that, like doing an ankle, shin, shin, ankle, like this, like getting kind of like that's a good quickness drill, and then it's a perfect prep for like whatever cue you're about to go do, because it kind of warms your brain up a little bit. And then another one, if you're doing an A, like a heavy A day, like where you're doing like lateral stuff and like a lot of that, like that should be pretty much, you really shouldn't go over gear 2. So like if you want to do like marches, skips, and then like shin step overs, that's about as high as I would go, just because of like we talked about like how aggressive side to side stuff is on your shins and your ankles and your knees. Like you want to limit it if you can.
Why did we used to do like, we would do like marching and skips at the old place sideways?
Same thing. I mean, it's a different stimulus. Like you are training. Like if you're gonna do like sideways stuff, I liked it just to kind of like get you to feel like how it feels to kind of push a little bit off the floor. But honestly, I really don't have a great answer for that. Like it's good for some people, but it's like anything, right? Like I like right now I'm doing all mine sideways because I'm trying to reteach myself how to get on the inside of my foot. So like it has benefits in probably a more rehab setting. It's just a good, I think, an athletic development skill to have. Like, I mean, skip sideways, you're probably pretty athletic. Like same with like running sideways, like that's.
Is it something that you want like brought back when we start?
Yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to it, especially with like, but like that's the thing, right? If you can't do it forward, you're probably gonna have a heck of a time doing it sideways. And that's probably part of the reason I did it, is because back in the day, it's like it worked. Then we came here, we just had a lot of kids who just struggled enough with the basic. It's like let's do it one at a time. We don't group them up separately enough these days. To maybe like if you do like once we start doing like stuff inside, like hey we need 2 groups to split it up. Like if it's like hey like I'm gonna take these guys a little more advanced, like maybe I will mess around with some sideways stuff today. Cool. Just know who you're coaching. Oh, here's a good thing on starts. If we ever like once we start getting the 3-point starts or like 4-point starts, you're really looking at a few key things here. You're gonna look at weight distribution, like where their weight. Are they heavy in the feet? Are they heavy in the hands? Are they kind of spread out together? Like where are their knee angles at? Where's their hip height? And where's their foot placement? Okay, so we'll go over this kind of backwards. So starting with foot placement. Like if we're doing a 3-point start, so like let's just say like in line here with the whiteboard, it's like and we're sprinting that way, I'll just have a kid put their heel on the line and then they're just gonna spin without moving their toe. And then so if I'm looking at my line right here, then I'm gonna go toe to heel and then get my hands on the line, right? And then I want my hips up and I'm gonna lean into my hands, okay? And that's really like, that's like your 40-yard dash setup right there. Like, took 2 seconds, right? You don't, like, there you literally there's a program out there that teaches people how to set up for the 40. They do like all this craziness where you're like, and I used to do this too, slide it back, feet together, slide it back, like, make sure I'm square, and then like I'm just gonna fall forward here and just like wind myself up, and it's just like, that's a lot. And it creates a lot of tension. And it's like, you need tension to some degree, but like, it's a lot. And like, when you can just literally step, turn, no. But what we're looking at here is like if we have low hips, it's going to be slower to get out, okay? And it's probably great for 100 meters, but in what we do, like hip height is everything, because low hips project you out, high hips project you up. And if we're thinking about trying to get our hips high so our legs can cycle fast underneath us, that's exactly what we want. And you got to think sport too, right? Even like a lineman gets down in the dirt, he has to get up right away. So like training that has like good benefits for just acceleration in general, and that's like, and it's a very strong movement. Like you don't want to be rocking necessarily 3 points with young kids right away, but like some of our more advanced people and definitely high schoolers, like that is a great like strength speed exercise to utilize.
And what?
Yeah.
Would you throw that in, like say you're doing 15s or something? You just throw that in as that's the
Oh heck yeah! That'd probably be the meat and potatoes of the session, and then everything else after that would be kind of this lighter, like maybe like some softer starts. Like if you're gonna do a hard start, because we'll get into kind of how to categorize these in here in a sec. Like a 3-point stance is a hard start. A push-up start is a hard start.
Mm-hmm.
Like a med ball throw start is a hard start. And anytime you're teaching these drills, you always want to see, can you do it on 2 feet first before you stagger your stance? That just takes a lot of it out, because oftentimes you'll see, especially with some more novices, you'll get them this stance, and they'll go here, same side. It's like if you just, and that's why I have them do it at the intake. I'm like, hey, just put your feet together, like bend your knees a little bit, stick your butt out, go here. You go forward. Oftentimes they'll like people will apply a step back, but if you're teaching somebody how to do a falling start, way easier to do it out of a bilateral square stance. Or like you put any like jumps or resistance to a sprint, like that's going to be a hard start.
Just basically the hardness of the start has to do with ground contact time. Or just amount of time or force.
Say again?
So a hard start would just be categorized as like the ground contact time or like the velocity you need to get out.
Static. So think like from a still position, right? Because you have to overcome inertia and gravity rather than if I'm moving, I have some momentum. So like a walk in, a falling, a running C, a high knee, or running A into a start, those are all soft starts. Whereas if I get down, like even like a push, step, go is kind of like a hybrid, right? Because like you're moving, but it's segmented, so you really are coming out of like a nothing, or like anything from the ground, or anything where you're standing still, like where you have to get up and go, like that's gonna be a hard start. Like backward seated, half knee, like hard starts. I'm gonna like backtrack real quick. So when I say like I meant to say high hips, like they will project you forward. All right, and I inversed it there. So it's like you want to go forward. You know, the higher hips will get you forward, whereas low hips, if you think about it like this, like if I come down here and I get like a cannonball, I'm gonna like shoot up, like in a bad way. You know what I'm saying? Like because I don't want to shoot up. I want to go like forward, and as my hands will kind of get me up as I rise over my run. But yeah, I mean, you can go soft starts from like a short position. You can go from like a high position here, and it's gonna go forward. You can go from a low position. You can go from like a really low position. Like you can go from all of them. Or like you can do like any kind of like it's like a flying start. So it's like, hey, let's build for 10, sprint for 10, or like build for 20, sprint for 10. Like those are all momentum based. That's where you want to go in terms of soft versus hard starts. So like hard. So yeah. So hard. Like if you want like a list here, like any segmented push up, explosive push up starts, like supine, 3 or 4 point starts, med ball starts. Or like any banded, sledded, or partnered resisted start. And then here's a hilarious freaking slide about why sled pushing is probably the dumbest thing if you want to get better at running. Just because you're holding the sled here, you got tight shoulders, there's no arm or coordinated arm involvement, right? So you're not rotating, there's no torso to hip rotation. You're collapsing in this hyper extended posture as you're trying to just push massive amounts of weight, and you're on the ground for literally the whole time.
So what is the benefit of a sled?
Strength.
Just getting something stronger. In the right context, yeah. Or a rehab setting, those are really good to use. But I mean, like young kids, like dude, go crazy on sleds. Like you push it, you pull it. Like really good for MMA fighters, like wrestlers. Like they do, like sleds are really good tool to utilize, but like if you're using it for the idea of speed, it's probably not going to help you too much. And if you do any resisted running just in the future, you should never do more than 10% of your body weight. And you really shouldn't do it more than 30 meters. So you shouldn't like run a resisted sprint longer than 30. If it's like a build, like a flying start, like I think that's different, but I can't remember off the top of my head. And then at any incline running, you want to be about like a 7 to 10% incline, so it's not very high. It's like outside, like here, like going up into the gym, that's probably about as high as you want to go. And same there, if you're doing hill runs or like anything like that for speed, not like conditioning but speed, it's going to be like 30 meters tops. So and then I guess we can go into like, hold on, let me double check because I want to go over like some like banded marching and like all that other stuff. It's usually, it helps though, right? Like I mean, because like a hill sprint, like it takes all the coaching out of it because you have to get forward because you're going Otherwise, you literally fall on your face or you fall backwards. So you're trying not to fall backwards by getting up forward. So it's awesome if we had one available. That'd be sick. But like you can also get the same considerations.
It's a dirt hill over here.
Yeah, way too tall. You also like bands would do the same trick. So like a lot of times, like me and Eric were talking about this the other day, like if you have a hard time getting someone to just lean forward and like step, and they keep crushing their heel upon ground contact, like if you band them in a mock drill, like that's going to give them the kind of security just to lean forward a little bit more, and they're going to get a better acceleration angle.
Like Sophia.
So, yeah, exactly. So like when you do like mock drills, there's really like 3 variations. There's like normal, and there's like, or like there's 4. There's like kind of like you're changing direction, like where we're doing different gears for different over heights for different reasons. And then there's like reaching overhead with like either with nothing or what you want like a med ball or a small plate, because then that gives them something to cue. They're not just here. They're like whoosh, like they're pushing into some resistance. That's good. I would never go over like 5 to 10 pounds. Little kids, maybe let them hold a chip over their head. But like usually I'll just give the high schoolers a 6-pound med ball and they'll just go crazy with that. Some of the stronger kids can pull a 10. But that's really good for getting more upright posture, and then a leaning posture would be like more of a banded mock drill. And when you do that, barely any tension. Like they should feel it, but like you're not trying to resist them. You're literally just going with them. It should be like just a little bit of tightness on the band. And we'll start doing those here pretty soon. And when we do that, we're probably for like economy's sake, like each one of you is gonna have to take a group of people, go all do your mock drills separate places, because when you partner up like that, it's gonna take forever because each person's gotta go. If you guys all take your own group and just do them together and then come back together for the speed, perfect timing. You just know you can be all on the same page. You guys want to see that really quick, a banded mock drill? Would that be helpful?
Yeah.
You want to grab a red band?
You want to do it out there or do it here?
You can do it in here. I'll just do a couple steps.
Just run through the wall. Where did these videos go?
On the internet?
On the tubes, man.
Are you serious? You didn't get my permission.
It's this newfangled thing where you can just throw stuff up.
You didn't get
People
my
see it.
permission.
We'll blur out your face, Trev.
Killed it.
Trevor, may I have your permission to post any and all footage of you? I don't know, I gotta call my mom. Amber!
Never.
That's what I was gonna say.
Hey Trev, we need to use your delicious handwriting too at some point.
Delicious.
So what?
Okay.
That blackboard.
So actually, I'm gonna use the chance. We can use barefoot. So you're thinking like I'll just tell kids put this right around the waistband of your shorts, okay? And I'm just gonna give him just a little bit. So it's like I'm not gonna hold it loose here, but I'm not going to stonewall him back. All right. So I usually just hold it with one hand. Careful with kids; they really like to snap kids with this. I tell them like the first thing I say is we bring these bands out. If we use them with kids, we're like, if you snap somebody,
We're done.
you're going to sit in the office with Tom and Eric for the rest of the session. You're not working out today. Usually works. I used to say you're going to go sit outside in the snow, but all right, don't have to worry about it anymore. So when and I'll tell him like hey, like kind of just lean into the band a little bit just so you feel it. Good, and then we're just going to go ahead and march in place. Ready, go. And go. Good, stand really tall. Good, and that just like allows him not to stick his butt out, right? Like if you see kids who are hunched over, or like they really just like if there's somebody who suffers with like sprinting, like really, or I said really heel heavy when they land, like that's a great one to use.
You can do that for skips too.
You do that for all of them. Oh yeah,
Let's see it, Ian.
I don't think we need to see it. Looks the same.
You just want to keep constant tension on it. Is what I'm
Light, and then I tell the people, especially because on the running A, like they're gonna take off, right? And like, well, one, they shouldn't. It should be at a walking pace for like if you to build up some like endurance, but like there should like the person needs to go with them. So either do one of two things. If they're gonna go and you're okay with that, and that's what you want to train, that's fine. But tell the partner like, hey, like when we do this like high knee, like you need to go with them because I don't want this band to be tight. Like you shouldn't be standing 5 yards away holding on to the band and then like you just get slingshotted forward.
I've seen videos.
Yeah, and it happens. Or like, I think like the biggest thing would be trying to get people to like. Honestly, it'd be a great tool to get them to slow down. Like, because like you should be like, all right, the person behind you is dictating how fast you go, right? Like you should just like you're going at a walk. Because that's the hardest thing. It's like so many people use a running like a high knee for like a speed, like get it over with. Like it should last like as long as like a 40-yard dash. Like take your time. Like take 5 seconds.
4.2 seconds for me.
4 point what, Trevor?
3.
That's a joke.
It's not that fast, honestly.
Are we testing on Saturday?
What?
Aren't we testing on Saturday?
Good. And never underestimate the value of like the
Gotta pay to
warm up
see that.
too, right? Like
Yeah.
that's also a great time to like, especially when kids are just doing little stretches. Like you want to pop in, like, hey, like let's try this. Like do like give them something to like work on in the warm up because like one will take it more seriously and like if you kind of like project out like how like this is part of the session and not just a warm up, I think that's gonna go a long way as well.
It's just more interesting.
Yeah, and yeah, like it is. It's like oh, like people actually care about the warm up. That's for sure.
It's weird.
You don't have these hands, do you?
I'm looking at it right now.
That kind of is in a nutshell what I have for that. We can go over next week. We can go over more of like our exercise pool, how I coach that, how like that looks different based on the kids we have and what we, because there are some like change of direction stuff in there that I just think none of you guys know about, which is fine. That's on me for not showing that to you. But we'll try to deep dive in that. It'll be more like practical and be more doing rather than just like learning. But any questions or what questions I should say? Like what do you see out there that I didn't answer in here just now?
Internal, external rotation of foot landing. Like soccer girls tend to go internal. You have a lot
You
of
have
guys
to try
that
to.
go
I mean,
external. That's complicated.
as much as you can get out of that, like I would maybe like you can only try to fix that probably in drills at best. So it's like if someone is like internally rotated, facing in, you'd have to start them. You'd have to get them to set up. You'd have to like get their toes straight and then tell them to rotate their knees outward. So it's like feet are cemented in, move your knees to your pinky toes, and then when you apply contact, you got to feel the outside of your foot. Where someone who's here, has got to feel the inside of their foot.
Stuff to do when running.
Exactly, that's why you don't tell them to do it when they're running. You would be like maybe more than drill, and like a feedback video feedback would be incredibly helpful there. But at the same time, right? Like that's maybe out of our scope of practice, and like you can do your best to try to write that, and like especially in the weight room now, like making sure they're not like when they lunge, they're not coming in here. If like you just see like it's one thing if they're here, but like if this thing's diving in, that means their whole hip wants to go in, and that's when we want to get them out on the outside of their hip. But anything else?
Good question.
Great question. Cool.
Good job.
Yeah. Well, what other things, and then like just keep in the back of your mind, like hopefully soon-ish here, I'll get some of you guys to start presenting stuff as well. Kind of what you're teaching. Hey, don't be hating.
Do you want to get beat up today?
Don't take
Polish
gold.
sausages, dude.
Huh? You
A
trying to
whole
follow you?
bucket of chicken one time.
Yeah. It's better than
Yeah.
wiener looking sausages.
What else do you guys need help learning on? Or what's anything specifically about speed that like you need to know more about?
Oh shit.
Was this helpful for cueing and drilling?
Without
100%.
Okay.
I think it's just
I need to eat very well.
continuing like the reps with
Yeah, just practicing
yeah,
it.
knowledge.
Good. Like 2 cues that I really took away from this that were like very effective. And here, is lift. Lift really helps because like if you just if you don't specify it works even better because it's like I want you to think like short quick words, but if I say lift, like arm will lift and leg will lift. So if you get somebody who's like getting arms good but legs are tough, like you tell them like, hey, like this next rep, I just want you to think lift, like just lift up, like the whole rep, like the whole sprint. That usually helps. But you don't want like long, slow words because like they associate that with like longer ground contact times. It sounds insane, but it's so true. Even words like go, or like what's the other one here? Like push, like pull, like paw, like up, pulse, flick, like down, like.
Doesn't also depend on how you say it.
Yes, but like.
So all the other words you said were also short, but you just said
Nope.
it long. Like go.
There's a term
Go.
about the.
Flick.
I learned this term today actually. They use it in like investigating. If you lead
Yeah.
the words that you say matter because if you lead someone to say something, like if you say a word like go and they in their mind think it's a slow word, then without even thinking about it subconsciously they will.
Yeah, because think go is a start word. You think about it once, it's done. Up, you can think up, like the whole sprint. If you think go, like look how much longer it takes for me to say that in my head. It's weird, but like that's the association. Is I'm thinking go. It's like up, like it's just quicker. And I'm not necessarily trying to say it faster, but like that just comes out quicker.
I think it's the time it takes, like your tongue position in your mouth.
I think we're getting the details we don't know anything about.
The
but,
nitty-gritty.
yeah.
Nitty-gritty.
But no, I think we can go over whatever else you guys have questions on. I'll like do some research too and see what else I need to dig up. I think there's like a whole nother like application of sport in there too. But what was the other thing? We do have an intake tonight at 6, so if someone wants to set up for that, that'd be sick.
Alex, closing statement.
Closing statement.
Yeah.
Speed kills.
Oh! That was good.